Hi, this is Ryan. In the original airing of this episode, we had Hush from the Lord of Illusions soundtrack right here. In order to respect the rights holders, we've removed it from the episode. I recommend you find the Lord of Illusions soundtrack and give it a listen. Welcome again to the Clive Barker podcast. This is episode 13, Books of Blood, volume 6. We're finishing up. This is part 2 of that episode. And I'm Ryan Danhauser, and with me today is José, the Portuguese man of war.
Hey, guys.
And Roger, let's hear it for the boys.
Greetings, everyone.
Hey, Roger. Great to have you.
Guys?
So, before we get started with Clive Barker news, we have the Occupy Midian Report.
And now, the Clive Barker podcast presents the Occupy Midian Report. The Occupy Midian Report is done by Crystal Raen from bringbacknightbreed.blogspot.com.
I had recorded this report previously. I had recorded it last night. However, in the meantime, actually not even 3 minutes ago, the Occupy Midian's petition for the Nightbreed Cabal Cut did reach 5,000 signatures. At the moment on our Facebook group, everybody's celebrating, talking about it, getting excited. There's some people crying. We finally reached this goal, and we did it on June 1st. We had wanted to do it by June 1st, but a couple hours later than we'd planned is not that big of a deal. We've also, on our Facebook group, we've had some new Occupy Midian sign photos, which are a really great addition to the Facebook group. It helps to remind everyone what we were gathered there for. It adds a face to Midian. So if you haven't yet, or if you just want to do another, I encourage you to create your own Occupy Midian sign photo and share it with us. Or if you are brave enough, do a testimonial video. There are a few that are up on YouTube, but as with the signatures, the more we have out there, the more likely we will be heard. So help us get the word out. Tell your friends, your family, your acquaintances, even strangers on the internet. Blog it, tweet it, Facebook it, pin it, Google Plus it, Stumble it, Scoop it, share it, email it. Come on, guys, you get the idea. The more effort we put forth, the more we'll have to show for it. Sounds cliche, but it tends to be true. Also, before the end of today's report, I want to remind y'all about the 2 screenings of the Nightbreed Cabal Cut that are coming up soon. The first one is at the New Beverly Cinema in Los Angeles on June 10th, and the second is going to be at the Portage Theater in Chicago on July 13th. For more information on these screenings, visit occupymidian.com/screenings.html. And also, I want to give a huge thank you, a huge shout out to everyone who worked so hard to get those last few signatures. Right now we're at 5,009. I'm sure José and Ryan will update you as to what the number is during their podcast. But just everybody has worked so hard. We've tweeted. We have worked really hard. We've had celebrities who have tweeted this for us. The list is huge. I will actually mention some of the celebrities that did tweet this on their blog for us and let you guys know who all helped us to get this out here so y'all can thank them. And as always, go forth and breed.
Okay, so yeah, we hit 5,000 people on June 1st, which 5,000 signatures on the petition, which is incredible.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. That was very exciting. Last night we were all like counting down and all that stuff.
Yeah, and one of our members really stood out and really pushed everyone to meet that goal. Colin. How do you say his last name?
Lakativa? I don't know.
Yeah,
sorry, Colin.
Colin, you got a really complicated last name, but he did an awesome job, and congratulations to him. There was another member there that was also
Christine Hoffman.
Yes, yeah, and they did something that I didn't think was possible, but they tweeted every single message that Twitter will allow you in one day, and then they were cut off.
Yeah, and Another one called Abigail. She also maxed out her Twitter. And
yeah, that's who I was thinking of was Abigail, which I think her name is Abigor at Abigor on Twitter.
Abigor is a Cenobite name. It's the from the Hellraiser comics. Yeah, it was the girlfriend of Pinhead.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, well, congratulations and thank you so much to them and everyone else that helped. You know, a lot of us were also doing stuff behind the scenes, you know, to get our signature numbers up. Yeah. We do want to remind everybody to please only sign once and don't sign it anonymously. I don't know why, you know, that looks suspicious when you do that. It just looks like you probably already signed it and now you're trying to sign it again without people knowing.
Yeah, well, the anonymous signatures, they do have to put in a valid email address. But, yeah, it's like you said. I mean, you want people to know that there are a lot of people out there, a lot of fans of the movie, and just be yourself and stand out and be counted. Don't be anonymous.
Yeah. And you know, I guess my dog could sign the petition anonymously. But you know, and that's tempting to do that. Obviously, we want the numbers to get up, and everybody was like, "Oh, we have a deadline," and we had people, you know, double signing and stuff at the end there, especially. But you know, don't do that. There are plenty of us out there. You know, and this is a legitimate petition. So
yeah, but still, it's been, for the most part, practically the totality of the signatures have been real people signing with their names.
Yes.
And that's amazing. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. We how many signatures are right now? I mean, we're on the way to 5,050 or something, right? Or is that already? So
yeah, I can't easily get to my Facebook right now to find the. Well, let's see. I could just type in the address.
And that's only in 2 months, right?
Exactly. The petition was put up on March 30th of this year. So, yeah, that's exactly it. It was 2 months, 2 days, and we reached 5,000.
Here you go, 5,048 signatures as of right now. We're recording this on Saturday, the 2nd of June. 10 o'clock a.m. Alaska time, which is 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern time, and 7 p.m. What do you call your time zone?
It's my time.
Yeah, it's José's time to shine.
It's José time. Let's have a beer.
Yeah, but 5,048. So awesome. When there's a new goal. To be honest with you, Russell Charrington, who's the restoration director of the Cabal Cut, has been setting these goals in the petition. So when there's a new goal, we'll let you know. He's the one who talks to Morgan Creek, so he knows more about, you know, how many signatures we need to get their attention and, you know, what our goals are and stuff for that. So we just help with it.
Yeah. Well, we're thinking about possibly getting the people in charge to show up in the podcast and be interviewed. So maybe one day we'll be able, you know, soon we'll be able to interview Russell, probably.
Yeah, which would be pretty cool. I guess in Clive Barker news via Twitter, Clive has been giving away a lot about upcoming projects. The first thing he said was, the Avarat films will be live action, but will obviously use immensely ambitious effects. So there's not a whole lot to say about that, I guess, other than, you know, awesome. I can't wait to see it if this makes it to the screen.
Yeah, and he is saying that from what I've understood, it sounds like it's a major company trying to do this. So this positive thing there.
Yeah, I think once they start filming, then we're, 95% in the clear, as far as this getting done.
Yeah, didn't he mention one of the producers or the producer would be someone from the Harry Potter films?
Yeah, so it's looking promising. It's just, the track record for him doing for him doing children's book fiction movies hasn't
been good.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm just thinking if it's going to be live action, will it be like similar? We probably saw a little bit of that, of how it might end up looking when we saw the book trailer, where you remember when Stephen Imhoff played Christopher Carey?
Yes, yeah, that Mark Miller
directed. That trailer. So it depends. I mean,
that would be cool. Yeah, and or you kind of wonder how like all these people are going to look. John Moot.
Yeah.
Or John, the Johns, I guess.
Right. Oh yeah. The guy with his brothers hanging from like tree branches from his head or something. That.
Yeah. And
special effects. Yeah.
Yeah, and all of the people that in the paintings are going to look so strange looking next to a live human being.
Oh yeah.
But it can be done. I mean, I guess Where the Wild Things Are was kind of a boring movie, but it can show you what they can do.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The next one, he said, the Nightbreed TV series will feature characters from the movie. Peliquin, Shunasasi, Boone, etc., but the tales are all new. So that is interesting. I'd kind of wondered if Ann Bobby and Craig Sheffer, might be interested in that.
I'd say so.
Yeah. And then Nick Vince, maybe?
Yeah. Sure. I mean, I think the question that's on everybody's head now is, will there be sex scenes between Peliquin and Shunasasi? That's personally, that's what I want to know.
Yes. Yeah, but obviously, this is awesome, for everybody in Occupy Midian. They're probably kind of holding their breaths for this Nightbreed TV series, and I really hope that it happens. And if a Nightbreed TV series is really coming out, then that's pretty much a shoo-in that Morgan Creek is going to let us do the movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because, every time a Marvel movie is coming out, then all of these old cartoon movies get re-released, or, the old Hulk made-for-TV movies get put on DVD again and stuff like that.
Yep.
So
merchandising. I'm holding out for merchandising. I want a Nightbreed lunchbox.
Yeah, it's like, oh, are you getting excited for this? Well, here's some of the stuff from the past. So I would say that would be huge for Occupy Midian.
Just fingers crossed, hoping for the best.
Yeah. Next, he said, I've been working on a tarot deck for a long time. Yes, it will happen. Obviously that would be pretty neat with his paintings on it.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking, even right now, he probably has enough paintings to make a tarot deck of cards, because he's got people doing all sorts of things in his paintings. It's just a matter of finding the right picture and putting it to the right arcane. But, if it's going to be done properly, then even better. If he's going to actually make the illustrations for that, amazing. Can't wait to buy it.
That would be cool. Hey, have either of you guys ever had your fortune told with tarot cards?
No.
Yeah, I have. I mean, I have a friend who does it, and I actually even had a tarot deck of cards. So right now, I think I have two. One of them is the Crowley deck of cards, and the other one is one by Milo Manara, who's a European artist that makes erotic fiction. So
I'd always wanted to get the H.R. Giger tarot deck.
That would be interesting.
Yeah. But I got my fortune told in New Orleans by someone who was using a tarot deck, and he knew all kinds of stuff that he knew that I was going to have a baby before Joey was before we knew. Which was really awesome. And he told me, that I was kind of stalled in my emotional growth, and the thing that would help me was when I have a son. And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. We don't have. Jennifer's not even pregnant. There's no baby coming. Because we've been together for 10 years and didn't have a child or anything.
Right. Well, that's interesting. I mean, wow, that's a cool experience to have your fortune told that way.
Yeah. Oh, Clive also tweeted about Occupy Midian. He said, wow, only 3 days left to sign the Nightbreed petition. Please help to get the real version released by signing. Thank you. So that was pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, yep, that's it for news. So far, all our news it's just been a week since our last episode. So all of our news so far has been just what Clive has been tweeting about upcoming projects.
Right.
Is there anything else you guys have that you can think of?
You're pretty much thorough. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, you got it.
All right. Well, so on to our main topic. We left this one story out because The Last Illusion, we wanted to talk about that and talk about Lord of Illusions, and we knew that we'd probably be talking for quite a while. So let's start off with the story, The Last Illusion. The one really cool thing about this is I don't know, I can't think of the chronology of this. Is this the first story with Harry D'Amour? It references the events of Lost Souls, but
I believe it is the first.
Lost Souls may have been written later.
You're saying that it references the events of Lost Souls?
Yeah.
In what way does it reference? It references the Wyckoff Street event,
yes.
but that is not what happens in Lost Souls.
Oh, Lost Souls was about Lazy Susan and
yeah, that's the one with Chat the demon and the supermarket guy who gives all the stuff away. Remember that?
Oh yeah.
I think this is one of those things that is never really put on paper. The Wyckoff incident at the Mimi Long.
Right. It's just
house.
This thing that haunts him all the time.
It's just something that really haunts him all the time. I don't know. Maybe Clive would, put some more detail on the Scarlet Gospels about that. That would be great.
Well, yeah, or it could go into Black as the Devil's Rainbow as a full story.
But I'm sorry, I was just being nitpicky. So
no, that's okay. So yeah, The Last Illusion. We're thinking it's probably the first, without actually checking the chronology of it. We're thinking that this may be the first Harry D'Amour story. So
that is the first published story.
So Harry is so to kind of do a little one-liner, I guess, about The Last Illusion. Harry D'Amour is a private detective who kind of finds himself over and over again stumbling into this dark world of hell and magic and stuff, and that's what happens in this story.
It's a really, really cool story that is one of the best of the Volume 6. And just to conclude the question you were asking a while ago, Lost Souls is the second Clive Barker short story to feature Harry D'Amour. The first one is The Last Illusion. Lost Souls was published on the magazine Time Out on issue 800 in December 19, 1985.
There we go.
So, and of course, The Last Illusion was published in the Books of Blood. So that's the first one.
Yeah. And then 1989, is it? I think is The Great and Secret Show?
Yes.
I think so, yeah.
And maybe 92 is Everville?
This one's saying Everville 94.
Oh, 94, okay. Yeah, Imagica came in between. I think Imagica was in 92.
92, yeah. That's
yeah.
So Harry D'Amour has been in like these two short stories, then the two novels of The Art.
Yeah.
And he's going to show up again on the Scarlet Gospels.
So what we find, Harry D'Amour sort of stumbles into this. Philip Swann is a magician, an illusionist, and he has to be on his toes because he's made this pact with the devil to give him all of this power, and he's sort of turned his back on it, and he's using it to do Las Vegas shows, which were just to make hell angry.
Mm-hmm.
And hell is out to get him. And one day he's not totally on his toes. He's not paying attention, and he gets a sword through his back.
Yeah. I'm going to be comparing a little bit back and forth, if that's okay with the movie.
Yeah.
Because that's right off the bat. There's a few major differences between Swann from the short story and Swann from the movie. And I think one of the main differences, of course, apart from Swann being dead most of the short story, instead of the movie where he's kind of a anti-hero, is that the Swann of the short story is a much more likable character. He's a much more confident, at least it seems to me, like
but he also gets killed while he's trying to have an affair, with some
it's true,
some patron that had come to watch the show. And Valentin had set this up for him.
Valentin used to procure like women for him to do his private affairs with. In this case, the girl that he's with before he's killed is a woman called Barbara Schneider. So after the show, like you said, they're going on stage, they're flirting, they're like, okay, let's go to my hotel, and that. Yeah. He just did his show with the sword act. And so the swords are now still hanging on the stage. And as he's walking by, one of the swords just like clicks off and just starts falling, and it kills Swann right in the middle of the stage. And the woman actually thinks he's still playing a prank on her, that he's doing like some kind of trick or illusion to play a trick on her.
And then she sees a tiger come in.
And then she hears a tiger, because he also used tigers in his acts. And then she hears a tiger, and the tiger eats her.
It swallows her whole. And you kind of find out later that tiger swallowing her whole was all in her mind. But she sort of loses her mind and still believes that she's living inside of a tiger.
Still, D'Amour gets to see the tiger at one point in the short story.
And one cool thing about this is this hell is the hell of the Books of Blood, like he calls it the Gulfs.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of the same hell from Hell's Event, which is a really scary kind of a hell being almost a sentient thing, that has ambition and plans and makes deals.
Exactly, and but just to complete the comparison, this Swann is a much more. He's much more comfortable with his magic. He's much more confident.
Yeah. Right.
And the Swann from the movie is almost, this guy is really edgy, and he's really like kind of awkward, and he's like a little bit.
He's nervous and scared.
He's nervous and scared. Right. He's kind of a coward. He fakes his own death. So I think right off the bat, I prefer this Swann from the short story, even though he's dead most of the time.
We don't really get to know him well.
Kevin J. O'Connor is a great actor, but. It's just the way that they decided to go with a different kind of Swann.
Yeah.
Too much vulnerability for him in the movie.
Yeah, too much vulnerability for someone who has so much power.
So Harry kind of is hired by Dorothea to figure out what's going on. Because she has no idea. Unlike in the movie, where in the movie Dorothea has a secret, and she kind of she wants Harry to help her, but she doesn't want to tell her anything that she knows. In this story, Dorothea doesn't know anything.
Well, she knows what she reads from the letter that Swann leaves behind. Because the day after Swann dies, Dorothea receives a letter where Swann requests her that, please take heed of my last wills, and please have someone look after my corpse. Don't let anybody get near it. Don't let anybody bury me until, the day after. I need to be in state for like 24 hours.
And then I need to be cremated.
And then he needs to be cremated. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's why she gets Harry D'Amour.
That's right. So he's not even really. That's right. He's not really investigating at the beginning. He's spending all night guarding a coffin.
He's corpse sitting for the night. Yep.
Yeah. And he gets a TV, to help him stay awake.
I wonder if the TV was playing. Creature feature show. That'd be great. Like Dr. Paul Bearer.
There you go.
Yes.
So he gets introduced, and Valentin right off the bat doesn't really seem to like him very much.
No, which is similar to the movie, but the character of Valentin is very different.
Oh yeah, very, very different.
Yeah, we find out that Valentin was actually his familiar. He was his tempter. He was the demon that was sort of the liaison to hell that made this deal with Swann.
Mm-hmm.
And he came to know and love Swann and serve him and sort of turned his back on hell.
Yeah, they almost became like almost friends. And he doesn't want his master to get claimed by hell. So he actually is doing his best to make sure that he gets cremated before the gulfs get to his soul.
And Butterfield is also a very different character from the movie. Butterfield is basically the attorney for hell to make sure that the contract is enforced.
Yeah, again, Clive gets a lawyer to work for hell, and almost like Hell's Event also involved politicians and lawyers.
Yeah, and so Butterfield comes back, and he's got these fantastical hell creatures. There's the castrato, which is a creature that's got this furnace burning inside of it, and it's this light that has to come out, and it burns all of these holes in his body, so that it's got no sex, and it's got like one big hole where its eyes and nose and mouth should be.
Yeah, the really fat guy that floats around singing.
Yeah, yeah, and the rappery.
That's the first monster that shows up in the story. So Harry D'Amour is left in the room with Swann's body, and after Valentin shows up, gives him a nightcap, they smoke a cigar and have some, brandy or something, and he go like, well, good night, and Harry D'Amour is left with a TV and Swann's body, and all of a sudden he starts getting a little, freaked out, and he starts feeling something's not right. And, the floor starts to disappear around him. The darkness starts to fill the windows, and he starts feeling like cut off from reality. And then he manages to, just as the last vestiges of floor fade out from under his feet, he jumps and he grabs onto the coffin where Swann's body is resting. And Swann kind of like wakes up, gets off the coffin, starts stomping on his head, and he's like, oh, no, I'm going to fall.
Yeah.
And then he wakes up, and he made a mess on the floor, and he was, like, passed out on the floor. And they go like, oh, you've been poisoned by Valentin. And it's Dorothea and Butterfield. And Valentin is nowhere to be found.
Yeah, so it's really interesting that Butterfield sort of has already ingrained himself with Dorothea and with Swann, and they've sort of said, uh-oh, the bad guy is Valentin. He's taken off, and he tried to poison you.
Yeah, when, in fact, it's not really that thing that's going on, because Butterfield tries to get rid of Harry D'Amour. He goes, well, thank you very much, Mr. D'Amour, but, I think we can take it from here. Here's your payment. You can go home, have a great evening.
And he's like, what do you think, Dorothea? And she's like, we're good.
Yeah, because Harry D'Amour, and I think this is a little forced, but Harry D'Amour, as soon as he meets Dorothea in the story, it's almost like he falls in love with her, like right off the bat. He goes, oh, wow, what a nice-looking widow. And and it's like, dude, her husband just died. He's in the coffin. In the room
but you do have to say that it's pretty much exactly the same in the movie.
Yeah, in that aspect, because in the movie, D'Amour also becomes enamored with Dorothea almost as soon as he sees her in the cemetery.
Yeah, that's the the general genre thing about the detective stories. Like if I can quote from Clive about Harry. Harry was inspired from three sources: Sam Spade, Philip Marlowe, and Kolchak the Night Stalker. But I don't think of him as any different from any of us. I think the dark side has a hold on all of our hearts. So that's where he came from, basically. And
is that the Harry of Lord of Illusions?
Yeah, pretty much. But I think it applies to both, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure. And he had said that. What Harry is sort of a part of himself, because Harry is always drawn to the dark side and he doesn't like it much, but he keeps going back to it, and that's kind of the way, Clive is more of a fantasy author, but he keeps getting drawn to this horrific stuff, from his dreams.
That's a good point. Yeah. In the actual story, the short story, The Last Illusion, There's actually a line where Harry D'Amour is thinking to himself that once you've been touched by this malignancy, it's like you can't really get rid of it. It'll always haunt you or something. And so when he leaves Dorothea's house, he's a little disappointed that, Dorothea said, okay, yeah, you can go. And he was like, oh, I wish I could be here a little longer because she's such a woman. But he goes home and, like you said, like Sam Spade, Philip Marlowe, they always have like one beautiful customer that walks into the office and she's like, oh, I need to hire you for something.
And this all takes place in New York. It's not like the movie where he's in New York and he gets a call to go do a case in L.A. and he flies all the way over to L.A. and he gets, tangled up in this over there. Here, this all is happening, right around where he lives.
Yeah, in fact, Clive Barker drops off a few names of streets while in the middle of the story. Like when he's like watching TV, babysitting the corpse, he mentions like the traffic was noisy on Lexington and 3rd. Even Wyckoff Street exists in New York because if you go on Google Maps, you can find it. It is a real street. I always thought it was a fictional street, but no, it turns out that there is a Wyckoff Street in Brooklyn. So.
Oh wow.
Just putting it out there.
Yeah, well, and Clive has lived in New York.
So he's walking back home to his office, and then he finds Valentin hiding behind a corner. Hey, D'Amour, and he's like, wait, what are you doing here? You tried to poison me. No, it's Butterfield. I had to escape because Butterfield is this horrible person, and he wants to,
And Valentin doesn't really give away everything right up off the bat.
No, he fights his true nature every step of the way until almost as the story is about to end, then he finds out who Valentin is. But as he's trying to explain to D'Amour that they need to go back and they need to, take care of Swann's body, there's this horrible noise and a darkness that starts to spill into the street where all the lamp lights are going out.
Oh, yeah.
So, and this monster that shows up is the Rapparee. It's this floating, tentacled kind of creature that's, enveloped in darkness, and it makes a horrible noise like a whistling. And so this thing just kind of like goes over the street and like swoops Valentin and disappears along with him. And, and that's when Harry D'Amour thinks, oh boy, here we go again,
Oh, that's right, and we're assuming that Valentin is dead at this point.
Yeah, we're assuming because there's like some puddles of lymph or whatever it is, and some jelly pieces of skin that depict that Valentin had teared at the beast and had teared off chunks of him. And after this is done,
is this where he tracks down the girl?
He tracks down Barbara.
Oh, yes.
After Valentin disappears, before he disappears, he tells him to find the woman who was with Swann when Swann died. So that's when he goes to her apartment, and like you said, she kind of lost her mind.
Yeah, she thinks she's inside the belly of a tiger. He's trying to interview her. He's like, oh, man. He kind of gives up, and he's like, all right, you're coming with me. And he tries to, he hears the noises coming up the stairs. And that's the Rapparee, right?
There's a lot of light coming out from the elevator.
Yeah.
So I think it might be the castrato.
It is the castrato, yep. So he's trying to drag her, and she sort of turns on him and pushes him away, and she runs up to them, and she actually gets eaten by a real tiger.
Yeah, because when D'Amour goes like, well, I'm going to have to follow her. And he goes up, and he sees a huge tiger, and he's just about swallowing her head. She's like, help me! And it's just like, boom. He just swallows her head like whole, and he turns towards him, and is like, oh, boy. And then I think he shoots at the tiger just disappears in confetti.
Yeah, so it's like, then he's wondering, is she in this confetti somehow, too? So he said that he didn't get a whole lot of information out of her.
So, yeah, I mean, and all through this, he's like, we're getting flashbacks of, like, what happened to D'Amour, what's haunting him, like Mimi Lomax and the priest. What was the name of the priest?
Mother Hess.
Yeah, so he leaves the doorman after he escapes the house, and he finds Valentin. And that's when Valentin tells him that he escaped the monster that had picked him up. Yeah, and Valentin is like, his arm is like all bandaged, and he's like, oh, I'll be fine. I can handle it. And so he says, well, what's important is that we go and get Swann's body and protect it, because, of course, he knows that Butterfield has already walked into the house, so he figures that he's trying to breach Swann's defenses, because Butterfield never got into the room where the casket was, because he can't approach the body because Swann still had some defenses around the body. Of course, they go in there, and they manage to get the body, Swann's body, out of the house after they have a confrontation with that creature that you mentioned, Ryan, the castrato.
The castrato, yeah. And this is kind of an interesting thing, because the castrato has got this internal furnace, this internal pressure. Harry shoots it with his gun a few times, and he blows these holes in it, and then the pressure balance kind of gets off, and this creature flies around the room like a balloon until it collapses and dies.
With a scream going higher and higher in pitch until it like
yeah.
There's a cool scene where they are actually dragging Swann out of the casket, and they see light coming into the room, and at first they think it's from the windows, but then they realize it's from the mirror that's in the room. The castrato was hidden inside the mirror.
Yeah, right.
It comes out of the mirror like it was a door. So I always thought that was a cool scene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, of course, they meet the poet cab driver.
Yeah. And he thinks it's great. He said, he loves all these different weird things that happen to him, while he's driving a cab, and he thinks it's great that they've got a dead body. And I think the one line that was, that actually made me laugh out loud, and I had to stop and tell Jennifer was, "Is your friend all right?" Or the cab driver did, and Harry said, "He's about as good as he's going to get."
Weekend at Swann's.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jeez. And they go like, "Is that a corpse?" And they're like, "Yes." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, I've had hookers turn tricks in my back seat, and I had all these sorts of weird things happening there. A dead guy is, it's no big deal."
He says, "For me, it's all material for my poetry, so that's fun."
Yeah. And he goes like, "Hey, you know what? I have a brother-in-law or something that has a funeral home. It's like trying to make a business for his family." And they're like, "Oh, can he do cremations?" And it's like, "I think so." "Well, can you call him now?"
Yeah. So they have to go to Harry's office to call him, and they get there, and the guy's like, "You know what?" The cab driver's like, "You know what? I'm really, really hungry. Why don't I go get some food, and then I'll come back."
Yeah.
So I think he had already called his brother-in-law.
I think he calls him when he stops on the way. I think he uses like a payphone or something, if I recall correctly. And he's going like, "Hey, what do you mean what time it is? Hey, I got you like a stiff. You can do a cremation or not." And he's like, "Okay."
Yeah, and they'll pay, and it's double overtime or something like that. Yeah.
And of course, there's also another little element that we left out, which is the janitor at Harry D'Amour's place. The janitor always keeps this furnace burning.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
Because it's cold, and the furnace is always keeping the heating system. And apparently, he's visited by Butterfield at one point. Just as the cab driver meets Dorothea outside, he goes like, "Hey, good-looking woman," and she goes like, "Oh, I'm looking for Harry D'Amour," and he's like, "Oh, he's right upstairs with another friend of mine. So hey, come over with me. I was just taking some food."
Yeah.
And she goes up, and she starts saying, "How can you be with that man?" And she points at Valentin, and she says, "He's not even human." And then Valentin is pointing fingers too. He's saying, "Well, that's not really Dorothea." She's trying to make Harry think that Valentin was lying all the time, and Valentin is a demon. And then she pulls his bandages, and we see that Valentin's arm is all scaly, and it's got these weird nails that end in beaks that open and close.
Yeah, like parrot beaks.
Yeah, she says, "He's not even human. He's one of them. He's one of the demons. He's trying to take Swann's soul." And Harry is a mix of being mesmerized, and at the same time he gets into a kind of a horny state. Because he can only see Dorothea, and he's like, "Oh, Dorothea." And he goes "Yeah, I believe her," and he points the gun at Valentin, and Valentin is like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah, and then he says, "You can shoot me if you want. I don't care." But she's not what you think she is. And he kind of insists. This is interesting because he kind of insists that she's not really Thea, and it turns out that she really is. but she had made a bargain with Butterfield.
Yeah, she attacks Harry D'Amour as soon as he displays some doubts that she's actually Dorothea. She starts screeching and attacks him, and she almost has this kind of like superhuman strength at some point.
Yeah.
Because I think she had some power that Butterfield had given her. And he shoots Dorothea, and it turns out, and Valentin is like, oh, now you did it. Now you're going to see what kind of like creature she is. And that's not Dorothea. That's not human. That's just some construct from hell. And she starts bleeding, and she starts like, going like this on the floor. And he goes like, oh, it's the real Dorothea. Okay.
Yeah. Oops.
And everybody's like, oh, wow. And she goes like, you're working for Butterfield? And she's like, yeah. You know, he promised me some power in this.
Yeah. So Dorothea is not a very sympathetic character.
Yeah. Another difference between the movie and the story is that Dorothea in the movie is this little girl that they save from Nyx's cult. Yeah. Which is kind of creepy because then she's a little girl and Swann is like this adult and he saves her and then they get married and they live together and they make it seem like it's more of a she's like grateful to Swann and they don't really have much of a relationship in terms of carnal relationship, but it's more like he adopted her almost like that.
Yeah.
But in the book, Dorothea was a prostitute that Valentin once procured for Swann, and then they just hit it off, and she actually, became his wife.
Yeah.
It's a very different character in that aspect.
Yeah, and so now Dorothea's dead. Harry and Valentin are trying to get the corpse to the crematorium, and they find the cab driver's been murdered.
Yeah, there's actually a funny moment when all this stuff with Dorothea trying to mesmerize Harry D'Amour, and actually Valentin starts piling up papers around Swann and starts trying to scratch like a match to burn him there inside Harry D'Amour's office. But then of course D'Amour shoots Dorothea, and then that doesn't happen.
Oh yeah, they're little origami figures he puts on his chest.
Yeah, that's a little further ahead because meanwhile the janitor of Harry D'Amour's office is stoking his furnace, and Butterfield shows up, and he's like, hey, and he's like, hey, who are you? And he starts mesmerizing the janitor, and he starts giving him some things. He throws some things into the furnace, and the janitor is like in a gaze, and he starts seeing like he's hearing his mother from inside the furnace, and he's like,
she's like, yo, you have to let me out of here.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you have to let me out. And he opens the door, and the things that Butterfield threw into the furnace are growing there.
Yeah.
They're like he's summoning something from hell. Because he sees Dorothea come down the stairs with a gunshot wound to the stomach, and he like puts her out of his misery and says, oh, okay, that didn't work.
Yeah, it's like, I knew that was a long shot, but at least it stalled him for a little bit.
Yeah, he's like, now I'm going to call the big guns. And that's when he goes to the furnace that the janitor is stoking, and he mesmerizes the janitor, and he puts those things in there. They start growing, and they come out. And this is a really cool part, because these creatures, they're like Cenobites in a way, I thought, because they turn the janitor's corpse and Dorothea's corpse into musical instruments.
Yeah, I had the same impression.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that reminds me of the comic story Songs of Metal and Flesh by Pete Atkins, where at the end you see like these Cenobites are turning this guy into his rib cage is like a xylophone, and they're like playing his lungs or his stomach or whatever it is, and they're like playing it like a bagpipe.
Yeah.
That's what these guys do, and they
also did put Dorothea into this series of musical instruments.
Yeah, and they're doing this horrible music, and they're coming up the stairs really, really slowly because it takes forever to them to come up to Harry D'Amour's office, doesn't it? I mean, sure take their time because meanwhile D'Amour is trying to break through the fire escape door.
Oh, and he gets this giant axe that this...
Yeah, but he still has enough time to go downstairs. Meanwhile, the monsters... Remember, the monsters are coming up the stairs, and I don't know what floor Harry D'Amour's office is in, but it seems like it wasn't that much, of a of a tall building. And Harry D'Amour he starts hearing the music. He runs downstairs. He goes into this pornographer's office, who claimed to have like a big axe in case someone wanted to assault him, because he had been like assaulted by jealous husbands or fathers or whatever because of his business of pornography. And so he breaks into the guy's office, goes in there, tries to find the axe, finds the axe, runs back upstairs just as he starts listening to the music come up behind him. And at that point, he kind of stops a little bit, and he gets like a little mesmerized, and he turns around and he sees them, and he sees like Dorothea's head, and
And that breaks the spell, seeing Dorothea in that, because he still loved her, was infatuated with her.
And so he manages to run upstairs again. Meanwhile, Valentin has laid Swann on the floor. He says, well, we're not going to take him anywhere to be cremated. It's going to have to be here. And he made these little origamis that he put on his chest and on his lips, and putting a little bit of like papers around him. And he's trying to strike a match to light him on fire. And he lights him on fire. And the flames start spreading really supernaturally fast. And meantime, D'Amour is trying his hard to break down the door so they can like throw themselves or escape from the fire escape before the monsters reach them.
Yeah.
And he's seeing that this is not going to work because it's taking too long. The monsters are already on the landing. They're already approaching Swann's body. And there's this huge monster that's also coming up behind these demons, which is more of a machine than a monster, right? I mean, it's more of a machine. He's like grabbing the wall, making holes in the wall, pushing himself up, and it's like this infernal engine that's alive and coming up to eat them or something. And then it's like Swann's body, it rises back to life in flames, right? I mean, he's all burning up. He like stands up, and he goes up to that infernal engine, taps him on the head, and hugs him, and it starts burning up, and it burns and burns and burns. Still, there's nothing left. And then he just lies back down and finishes burning, and it burns down until there's almost nothing left as well. Butterfield is like, well, you win this round, D'Amour.
like Skeletor.
Yeah, it's like I'm picturing him wagging his finger at D'Amour. You win this time.
I'll be back.
Shaking his fist. He who fights and runs away lives to fight another day.
So that's a pretty cool story.
Yeah, really good.
Really good story.
So on Lord of Illusions, you and I talked about this last time, but I edited it out so that we could do it on this episode. But yeah, what was your first impression seeing the movie Lord of Illusions? We'll start with Roger.
I believe I saw it on video. It's just the first impression of it was like, I love the movie. Clive did an excellent job directing. Just all the visuals, and I mean, the only thing I didn't care for were the cultist aspect of it. I don't think that really fit in as well as it could have. I don't know how to say it, but I mean, all the magic stuff I loved. I just ate that up.
What about you, Jose?
It's hard to. Well, first of all, I'm trying to figure out if I saw the movie first or if I read the short story first. And I think I read the short story first, and then I saw the movie. I never really managed to click the two together in my head. I always thought of them as standalone things. What worked for me in the movie, like Roger said, was the whole idea of, the magic, and that the magic is real, and then there's illusionism, and the whole sequence with the magic castle, all that stuff is great. I mean, the cultists, I didn't really mind. It was okay. I mean, I thought it was cool. I just didn't understand why it took so long to release Nyx, and it seemed to be a pretty easy process to get Nyx back from the dead. So why did it take so long to do it? And another thing,
there was probably some magic to it that we didn't know or see.
Yeah, I remember that Butterfield says to Dorothea at one point, he says, well, I had to teach myself how to bring him back. But then it's like, they just like dig him up, and then he uses like a special sonic screwdriver, and he like wakes him up.
Yeah.
So it didn't seem that there was any magic, any like ritual or anything that he had to do. He just had to have the right tool to unscrew that thing.
Well, maybe the tools were magic somehow.
Yeah, could be. I mean, yeah, that makes sense. And then I think that the third act of the movie kind of like falls apart a little bit, in my opinion. I mean, I love the movie. It's one of my favorite Clive Barker movies. Probably my favorite one, even more so than Hellraiser and Nightbreed in some aspects. But like you said, I mean, some parts of the movie, I think the whole ending, the whole thing where he comes back and then the cultists start worshiping him and like destroys them, and all he wants to have is Swann. It's a strange turn of events that I don't really understand very well. I think there's a little throwback to the Damnation game. You remember Mamulian and Pinhead?
He's kind of a Nyx-like character.
Yeah, Mamulian is kind of like a Nyx character that's been rebooted and put into the Lord of Illusions, because what he wants is, this is a guy who has power or has learned about power, and he has transmitted his special power to another guy. And then a lot of years go by, and he comes back and he says, well, it's time for me to go into the great beyond, or into the great darkness, and I want my disciple to come with me. So that was what the Damnation game was about. Mamulian wanted Whitehead to go with him into the dark, and I could swear that that's what Nyx says to Swann as well in the movie. He's like, oh, you've been a disappointment, and I told you there would be a price, and now I want you to join me, and then there's like a big hole on the floor. And it's almost like he wants to go down and, into the hole with Swann, even though he says he's going to murder the world first. It's going to take a little while.
Yeah.
So that was my idea. I think, it's a great movie. I just think the third act kind of falls apart a little bit. I think for the majority of the people, they probably didn't understand what Nyx really wanted.
You guys seen the theatrical cut?
No, I just have the DVD. Which is like 11 minutes longer.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Did you see the theatrical cut, Roger?
No.
I saw it in the theater, actually. Because Nightbreed was sort of my introduction to Clive Barker, and then I went nuts, buying everything that I possibly could, and probably Candyman was my first one that I saw in the theater, and Hellraiser 3, which are and are not, Clive Barker movies, because they're not directed by him or written by him.
So you're saying you saw Hellraiser 3 before you saw 1 and 2?
No, I mean in the theater, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Oh, okay, right.
Yeah, my first movies in the theater were Candyman and Hellraiser 3, because they came out about the same time. Then Lord of Illusions, I was living here in Fairbanks, and Jennifer, who we weren't married yet, we were engaged. She was going to college in Washington State, and so I just went to the theater over and over and over and watched Lord of Illusions over and over again. And my first time seeing it, I was disappointed that it wasn't more like The Last Illusion, because I wanted to see hell and I wanted to see all those demons.
Yeah.
But the more I thought of it as its own thing, which it really is. I mean, like you said, it's not a whole lot other than, having a lot of the same characters. Other than, it's really not very similar.
No, it's like it's just the character names. I mean, if you change the character names, there's just a mild similarity in the fact that Harry D'Amour walks into a room where he's supposed to be babysitting Swann's body, but it's not even Swann's body because he's not dead.
Yeah. So my first impression was, at first I was disappointed, and then the more I saw the movie, the more I was able to get past that and love the movie for what it is instead of for what I was expecting when I went to see it in the theater, if that makes sense. So, and also, the theatrical cut was not nearly as good as what's in the DVD, and Clive did a kind of a cool thing by, he made them promise that he could do whatever he wanted in an unrated director's cut of the movie. And unlike a lot of other movies, the theatrical cut just disappeared from existence.
Yep.
After the DVD came out and the Laserdisc and all of those, I think that you could get the theatrical cut for a short time on VHS.
Oh, yeah?
But it was mostly the director's cut took over, and people pretty much have almost forgotten what was, missing from that.
I think I remember in an interview, Clive said something that he had been, his contract, what he was promised is that he would get his director's cut on laser. So that's why Laserdisc and DVD and...
yeah.
Is there a Blu-ray of Lord of Illusions?
No.
Ah, that's a shame.
I know, and actually watching this movie again twice recently, it's an old DVD. Uh-huh. So the resolution is not great, and it really could use to be put in high definition.
It's probably they use the transfer for the Laserdisc, and they probably put it on the DVD.
Yeah, I mean the colors aren't very vivid or bright, and and I watched it on a Blu-ray player, so it was upscaled, and that didn't really even help it that much.
Wow, can you guys imagine the scene at the Pantages Theater, like Swann show in Blu-ray?
Wow!
Oh my God! Yeah, it would be so vivid and bright, and I think I was kind of a little put off because I'm so used to watching Blu-rays now, and I was a little put off watching this again. I don't know, just there's something about really, really old DVDs from the 90s, like that when they first came out, and there's just like almost nothing in the way of special features, and then the quality is not very good. I mean, at least it was in widescreen.
Yeah, I mean, you're complaining. I got a DVD of Nightbreed, which is the Italian one, so it's called Cabal, and it's got like Peliquin on the cover. And this is one of those pan and scan DVDs where it's hard to explain. It's a different kind of image, and you see all these scratches and dots on the. It's like someone pointed a camera at a
movie screen
theater. Yeah, at a movie screen. It's almost, and it's just that bad. It's like the colors are off. You see all these scratches and stuff, but at the same time, kind of gives it a little grindhouse feeling to it. So
yeah.
It's just too bad that it's all dubbed in Italian, so you see like Peliquin speaking in Italian and stuff, and there's no other alternate audio on the DVD. But
Well, and like if Nightbreed and Lord of Illusions were Hellraiser movies, there would be no concern about whether it needed to be put on Blu-ray. It would just have to be done. I mean, Hellraiser gets all of the glory as far as like new additions and.
Don't get me started on the fact that Hellraiser Revelations is on Blu-ray and Lord of Illusions is not.
Yeah, but at least Lord of Illusions went to the theater, and Hellraiser 9 never even had a chance of getting there.
And Ryan, you have the Laserdisc, right?
Yeah. So Jose just bought it too.
Yeah, I got the Laserdisc too. It's nice. I mean, I think this is my first Laserdisc, so I had seen Laserdiscs before, but this is the only one I own so far. And it's so impressive to take it off the sleeve. It's like this big-ass CD.
Yeah.
I always, I kept my Laserdisc player for years and years and 2 years, and Jennifer had talked me into getting rid of it. But I always had this kind of feeling of nostalgia putting a Laserdisc in, and when you hit play and you hear that and it starts spinning up, and even back in the early 80s, we had our Laserdisc player hooked up through the stereo, so that when we watched Star Wars, everybody else had, mono videotapes. We had the Star Wars music, hooked up through the stereo, and we actually had real stereo sound on the Laserdiscs. So for me, Laserdiscs were like a million times better than videotapes, even if you had to get up and turn them over all the time. Yeah. It's not. I mean, DVD was still always. I mean, it's still better in every way except for the cover art.
But yeah, speaking of the cover art, the Laserdisc is amazing. I mean, that's a movie cover. I mean, you just open it up, it's like a gatefold, and you got all this art inside. That's just beautiful to look at. Yeah.
You should get the Hellraiser box set too, because it has a similar kind of thing, and it has a copy of the screenplay inside.
Yeah. Is it the one that's also black and you only see the pins of Pinhead in the front?
Yeah.
Okay. I've seen that on eBay, but I never bothered buying it.
That one's really nice.
But, the movie has some... I mean, I think I can talk about the scenes that impacted me the most from the movie. Mm-hmm. And, of course, there's the Pantages Theater show where, Swann gets the swords. And then there's also, another scene that I enjoy very much is when Harry D'Amour is looking at the corpse and he comes to the realization that that's not Swann, and he like reaches into Swann's mouth and rips out its jaw.
Yeah, and Dorothy is like, thinking he's really ripping Swann's jaw off.
Yeah, and it's always a cringe-worthy moment for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. For me, the scariest part, even though it's like I've seen it 100 times, the scariest part is always when Butterfield has Valentin pinned down to the floor, and he's saying, I'd always thought that I'd like to be a surgeon. And I could, say that eye is troubling you. I could scoop it out. And he's got this little knife, and he's kind of poking him, and you're thinking, oh, God, he's going to scoop his eye out. And that gets me every single time, and I don't know why, even though I know he's not going to do it.
Knife to the eye. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh.
And the other to the gums.
Yeah. Oh, man. And Valentin's scream is, when he's, like, cutting the inside of his lip and his gums is so, it's so... He's like, oh, no, please.
Butterfield is one sick puppy.
Yeah, yeah. And so, going back to what Roger had said about the cultists, Clive had said that it was getting near the end of the millennium, and there were all of these new cults popping up everywhere, all over the world. And so this was kind of his way of kind of dealing with that. And I think it's kind of an interesting... it's kind of got an interesting moral tale to it. These cultists are pretty much idiots, that had followed Nix and Butterfield for 13 years, just waiting for him to come back. And then when he does, he treats them like garbage. He just kills them all like they're nothing.
Yeah, I think that the new resurrected Nix comes to this realization that I don't need disciples. I'm just here. I just want to destroy the world and be done with it.
Yeah. He says the grave is lonely, living is worse. And that's another really cool thing about Lord of Illusions, that every single thing that Nix says is an awesome quote.
Yep.
He's kind of like Pinhead in that way.
Exactly. And the music of the movie is really, really cool. It's from Simon Boswell. And just like, I think it was on 2011, like last year, the complete two CD soundtrack was released. Yeah, and it was very limited. You had to act quickly to get it. Like 1,200 limited edition or something, or 1,500. I was too late to get it from that website, but I found some guy on eBay selling it in Australia, so I ended up getting one. You listened to it, the whole thing? Oh yeah, it's really good. And there's music on there that's in the movie that never made it to the official soundtrack. Right. Like they just wanted to save space for the, non-Simon Boswell songs and still fit it all onto one disc. Exactly. And the track, I have to say this, the track names are pretty funny. There's one particular track that's like Harry, it's like Nick's Fingers Swann. And nicks up his own hole and stuff like that. It's like, how did that get in the back of the CD? It's funny. Simon Boswell is a pretty funny guy. So, I recommend that. Really good soundtrack, and if you want, the isolated score that doesn't have all of Nix's quotes, kind of jammed, over the music, and you don't care about the Erasure song and the Brave Combo song and the Diamant de Galas song. It's an awesome soundtrack. I mean, I if you're a big fan, I would just get both. I'm a big fan of Diamant de Galas, and me too. Actually, after I saw this movie, I bought all of her albums. Oh, okay. And actually, I've seen her live a few times, and she kind of autographed some things for me. And she had a book of her lyrics called The Shit of God. Yeah. Which actually is the foreword is done by Clive Barker. Right. So just putting it out there. Yeah. And she sings in different languages all the time. Yeah. Some of her albums are just stream of consciousness, just her kind of yelling. And some of them, she's a really good piano player, and she's got this weird kind of talent singing where she can almost sing in two voices at once. So is she the one that did the end song, Dancing in the Dark? Is that the one? Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
And she'll take old songs like that or old lullabies and sing them and put this sort of dark, satanic kind of a tone to them.
Yeah, like Gloomy Sunday or Let My People Go.
Or Mama's Gonna Buy You a Mockingbird.
So yeah, she also does that kind of special effects soundtrack where you hear like the voices go, those little screeching soundtracks on the movie, especially in the Cultists compound. That's her doing the voice for that too.
Oh yeah, right. And that's the Simon Boswell soundtrack, the limited edition, but it doesn't really credit her on there.
And here's trivia time. There's this guy that shows up on Borat the movie who shows up in Lord of Illusions.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I posted this on the podcast Facebook page. It's that guy with a beard. Okay, here it is. I put a post of trivia on the Clive Barker podcast Facebook page. Here it is. It's this guy called Ken Davitian. Mm-hmm. And he's one of the audience members at the Pantages Theater scene.
Oh, yeah, of course. He's the big guy that like gets out of the limo, right, to walk into the theater.
Exactly.
I didn't even put that together at all.
He's like coming out of the limo.
It's like
and
10 years earlier.
And there's like this gorgeous blonde coming out of the limo, and then he comes out of the limo smoking a cigar, and he's like, oh.
Yeah.
So that's the guy from Borat there. And
man.
I think I remember other people from other movies that, show up in this one.
The guy who plays Swann, you see him in stuff all the time. He always plays kind of a Winnie Turncoat kind of a character.
Yeah, he's big in the Mummy movies.
Yeah, he was in Stargate also, I think.
Oh, was he? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I always remember him as Brendan Fraser's brother or whatever. Like in the Mummy movies, he's like the guy who's a real coward, and I think he plays like Brendan Fraser's brother or something.
Yeah, I can't remember the Mummy movies very well. I've seen the first one and maybe the second one, and I've never watched any Scorpion King movies.
And then, of course, we get the gorgeous Famke Janssen.
Yep.
She's amazing. She's Jean Grey in the X-Men movies.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing, I didn't bid on it, which kind of haunts me to this day. But I remember that the pink pumps that she uses in the movie, they were on eBay.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I think I still have the auction saved somewhere on a hard drive. They were signed by Famke, and you remember the scene where she's dressed in like a pink dress. Yeah, she's in her place, and she's talking to Damour. She was wearing pink pumps, and those pink pumps were on eBay. Some guy right now, he's got them somewhere on a shelf.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, he reaches out and he takes a big whiff.
Yeah, puts them on and walks around when nobody's there.
That's horrible. So yeah, some guy out there has Famke's shoes.
Wow.
Yeah. That's just a funny bit of trivia that I remembered from eBay.
Yeah, that's funny. So I like Nix, and I like the cult aspect, and I like the scene of him, drowning them all in the mud, like in The Skin of the Fathers, or The Skins of the Fathers.
Yeah, I remember that. When the desert, the sand turns to quicksand and it swallows the people.
Yeah, and then it hardens again, and they're all sort of jammed in the sand there.
Yeah, it's great visual.
Yeah, and one of my absolute favorite scenes in this is, and he says, I've come to bring you the wisdom of the grave. Will you hear it? And they're like, oh, yes, please show us. And he's holding Dorothea over this hole. And so in their minds, you can tell by watching the movie that in their minds they're thinking, he's going to drop her in the hole. And, drop her in the hole, we want to see. And he doesn't drop her in the hole. Instead, he turns all of the ground all around him into the mud and kills all of them instead.
Yeah. His third eye opens up, and all this, all these clouds all this fumes start coming out of his head, and and it turns into kind of a rainstorm inside the compound, and then that rain is I always call it a chubby rain.
Yeah.
It's like they start like falling to the ground, and it's like, oh no, and then it kind of swallows them.
Yeah, and then he turns it into this bright sun, and it hardens the ground.
Yeah. I have this series of articles that came out in Fangoria back in the 90s. They did, I think it was either 3 or 4 number coverage of the movie, where they covered like pre-production, filming, and post-production.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And they were on set interviewing Clive Barker. And this was at a time when he was like running around getting dailies from A Lord of Illusions, getting dailies from Hellraiser Bloodline, and getting dailies from Candyman. So he was mentioning that at the time his house had an office that was full of tapes.
Oh.
Which I'm sure that's how the Nightbreed Workbrink tapes ended up getting buried. Because
it would have been a Candyman sequel.
Yeah.
Not the first one.
And one of the moments when the Fangoria guy walks into the set, what Clive was doing at the time was he had all the cultists gathered up in the set, and he was asking them to scream as hard as they could, and just to get into the mood. He was like, oh, these guys are all covered in blood, and they're all screaming at the top of their lungs, and the cameras aren't even rolling. It's just an exercise to make everybody feel awkward and, weirded out. And it's like, okay, now we can shoot the scene. So it's just one of the things that I thought was really cool.
And actually, one scene, the scene where they say, "While the blood's running warm in your," and it's showing all the different cultists and their different families and how they've all how they've killed them all, or how they've left their old life so they could go back to Nyx. That was all cut out of the theatrical version.
Really?
Yeah. So, there's just no explanation about how what their life was in between.
So the people end up thinking that the cultists have been in the compound for 13 years, just waiting for...
Yeah.
Oh, man. So they're like, oh, these guys are still here? And it's like, they had a life, and they the sleeper has awakened, so they kill all their families and go back.
Yeah.
I'm dropping a lot of references today.
Yeah, that was Dude, right?
Yeah. So, but one of the scenes that I think is the cheapest moment of the movie, you know which one it is? It's kind of a funny moment, but I think it's kind of a cheap thing. It's when Harry D'Amour goes to visit one of Swann's original friends who went into the compound to kill Nyx. It's like a woman. And he's walking around with her outside, and it's like... this
Jennifer Desiderio.
Yeah, Desiderio. And she's like in a nun-ran sanatorium.
Convent, yeah.
Yeah. And all of a sudden, she's talking about how the Puritan is coming, and the Puritan is digging his way back. And then we see this construction work being done outside the sanatorium. And you see someone is digging a hole, and there's dirt coming out of the hole. And then all of a sudden, you see these two hands reach out the edge of the hole. And the music gets into this really big crescendo. And then it's just a construction worker. It just jumps out of the hole.
Yeah, and it's not... I don't think the audience ever really expected something to happen there, but the mood, the mood is still kind of fun anyway.
Yeah, I was like, well, okay, that was almost like, okay, kids, here's how music can completely change a scene.
Yeah.
Okay, it's just a guy coming out of a hole, but they make it sound like, oh, something's coming.
And then I feel like it's a little forced when he's trying to talk to her and she's all freaked out, and the nun comes over and grabs Harry and is like, she's like wrestling with him and saying, I'll take it from here. And it's like, why would she do that? Why is she acting like that? And then that gives Jennifer the opportunity to run away and go get hit by the car. And she gets hit, and she's lying under the tires, and the car is already stopped, and there's nobody getting out of the car. I don't know. I don't like that scene.
Yeah, I think that whole Desiderio scene is a little bit it's a little paint by numbers, and it's a little cliche.
Yeah.
The nun
that
grabbing.
Could have been done better.
Harry. Yeah, like the nun grabbing Harry, like you said. It's like, oh, she's getting agitated. I need to bring her back, but I'm going to hold on to you, and I'm going to shake you because you agitated her.
Yeah, she should have. Yeah, she she should have just said, all right, and tried to get Jennifer Desiderio back, not mess around with Harry.
Right.
Yeah. So what do you guys have anything else to say about the movie?
Have we heard any update about Daniel von Bargen?
No, not that I know of. That is something that was something awful, because Daniel von Bargen, the actor who played Nix, when was this? This was like 2 months ago or
3
months ago. Unfortunately, apparently he suffered from diabetes, and he, according to his own words, he was not a good patient, and he had already had his leg amputated, and he was due to go back to the hospital to get his other foot amputated, and he couldn't handle it, so he shot himself in the head, but he didn't die. He didn't die, and he managed to call 911 to ask for help, and they took him in. He was critical, and I don't really know what happened to him.
I don't know either.
Yeah, that was a horrible bit of news. And I saw Daniel von Bargen tried killing himself, and I'm like, what? And I had no idea. So yeah, we should probably look into it, see if there's any update on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So anyway, I really love Lord of Illusions, and honestly, as much as I love Hellraiser and Nightbreed, and I probably like them better, but I still go back and watch Lord of Illusions more often. And I don't know why that is, but, actually another thing, something that I wanted to talk about with Lord of Illusions is he's got sort of an ensemble cast, right? For Hellraiser 1 and 2 and Nightbreed, there's a lot of the same actors that come back again and again. None of those people are in Lord of Illusions.
That's true, yeah. Well, for example, there's no people from Hellraiser here. And no people from Nightbreed either. It's pretty much, like you said, a brand new cast.
Yeah, and I would say probably because it was filmed in the U.S. instead of in London. But still, I would imagine that those people would have been interested in being a part of it.
This movie was completely done in L.A., right?
Yeah.
Maybe that had something to do with it. Maybe equity or whatever. They couldn't work there. I don't know. But one of the things that's really interesting is that there was supposed to be a kind of a prequel to Lord of Illusions. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And
it was talked about on Revelations.
Yeah, and there is actually a script that was already written by Clive Barker. It would be called The Great Unknown, Harry D'Amour's First Adventure, written by Clive Barker, May 11, 1988. So this was featured in a magazine article in a magazine called Fantasia. And I think the article was written by a guy called Andy Mangle, and there's a whole story here. I mean, I'm not gonna spoil it, but I'll just, if you guys don't mind, I'm just gonna go over it generally. It was supposed to be Mr. Mazzetti is breaking America's greatest psychopaths out of prisons and mental hospitals all over the country, leading them all towards New York City. It is there that private detective Harry D'Amour has set up a rather boring practice, catching cheating husbands and the like. On this night, though, Harry comes across a pair of seeming extraterrestrials who are trying to protect a mysterious object known as the Nazaku. Unfortunately for them and Harry, Mazzetti and his supernatural goons are trying to get to the Nazaku and will stop at nothing to do so. So there's a lot of Harry D'Amour is trying to find out more about this Nazaku. There's like a battle with an octopus-like creature called the Malfrey. And he goes into Norma Payne's apartment. Norma Payne is the blind psychic that shows up in Lost Souls.
Right, yeah.
She's an old psychic who fills Harry with dire warnings of a parallel universe known as the Metacosm, especially after the Nazaku is breached and genie-like men escapes from it. It seems like it would have been a really amazing story with a lot of special effects, and it's just unfortunate that this movie never got made. I don't know if it has anything to do with the fact that this guy spoiled the whole script by revealing everything that happens in it, because this is like a whole page with 3 columns, and he goes like step by step what happens in the movie. And then he goes like to say, this is one of the poorest Barker stories I've read, and I've read them all. Barker's recent penchant for the metaphysical becomes so self-involved as to lose the reader, much as in The Great and Secret Show. Can you believe this guy?
Wow.
This thing that The Great and Secret Show is a bad story, that Clive was getting too involved in metaphysical stories. I mean, this guy, I think what this guy wanted was just like more horror, more books of blood.
Yeah.
And like as soon as Clive Barker started getting to more fantastic, content, he was like, "Oh, I don't like this. I want more horror." So to actually go around and say that, "Oh, The Great and Secret Show, it's a self-involved story that loses the reader," it just goes to show what kind of guy this guy was.
Yeah, that's pretty crappy.
Yeah, he goes like, "Oh, several times in the script, I ceased caring what happened to the characters or plot. I read an obligation to writing this review, not for enjoyment." Like, can you believe this guy? It's not a surprise that Clive Barker immediately cut off any relations with this guy, and he never allowed him to go back to his place.
Yeah, boo to you, sir, if you're listening to this.
Yeah, so, And then, he goes on about this. There's like, he goes on about Barker's recent trend towards the cosmic, abstract, and metaphysical is not a welcome change for this fan, nor for many of his other horror fans. Yeah, again, with the horror.
What, he had already written Weave World. I mean, was that bad? Was that a really bad book, too?
And then he ends the review saying, "If I wanted magic plague detectives, I'll stick to Hellblazer. Perhaps Clive should, too."
Oh. Perhaps Clive should, too.
Yeah.
What's that supposed to mean?
I don't know. Anyway, this was the guy who spoiled the whole script for The Great Unknown, Harry D'Amour's first adventure that Clive wrote in the 11th of May, 1988.
Does he have an email address at the end?
No, unfortunately not. But this magazine is from the 90s.
Yeah.
So, it's been a while since this was
I wonder if he's still writing somewhere.
I think it was Fantasia magazine number 13, if I recall. Fantasia with a Z. It's got the dinosaurs. Do you remember those dinosaurs from Jim Henson?
Yeah.
Not the mommy.
Yeah.
Right.
It's got the father and son in the cover. It's called Fantasia magazine with a Z. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, boo, I say. Okay. So we've got some questions from readers, or not readers, from listeners, from the forum. Whole bunch of them, and I'm gonna read each one in its entirety, and then we can sort of break them into parts and talk about them. So his first one, he said, maybe you guys can mention some of the Italian cinema's influences on Lord of Illusions. The final shot in Fulci's The Beyond and Lord of Illusions' final shot of Dorothea and D'Amour looking off into the desert were strikingly similar. I asked Clive about it on Twitter, and he confirmed it was an homage to Fulci.
Oh, okay.
I've never seen The Beyond.
I have not seen The Beyond, too. I've seen some of Fulci's movies, but I have not seen The Beyond. So
I've only seen his zombie movies.
Yeah.
That's all I've seen.
Okay. So sorry, David, you know more than us.
Well, if Clive Barker says it is an homage, then it's because it is.
Yeah. He wrote, I read in an old Fangoria article that Clive was actually good friends with him being Fulci. Another influence on Clive may have been Bava. Years ago, I was watching Bava's Black Sunday, The Mask of Satan. The same day my Nyx bust arrived, I noticed that the magic binding mask left wounds in exactly the same spot on Barbara Steele's face. In that film, she was a witch that had a mask nailed to her face to take away her powers.
That rings a bell. I've seen some Mario Bava movies, so yeah, I think I've seen that one.
That Black Sunday or The Mask of Satan, there's a lot of footage of that in a King Diamond music video called Sleepless Nights. And that's all I've seen of that movie because I'm a huge fan of King Diamond.
Okay.
But I haven't actually watched the whole movie. That's a black and white movie, right?
Yeah, that's one of those classic ones that I haven't gotten a chance to track down yet.
Yeah, there's a lot of those classic movies that you can stream for free on Netflix now.
Yeah.
So maybe that's in there. I don't know. But yeah, that's a really cool, poignant thing that David's brought up.
Yeah.
He wrote, plus Steele's character's name was Katya. At the time, I wondered if Clive named the woman in Cold Heart Canyon after her, or maybe it's just a coincidence. I'm pretty sure Clive loved this movie, though. There was a scene of her resurrection when the mask is removed, and it looked like they used a reverse melting effect like Frank's resurrection in Hellraiser.
Oh, cool.
So, Katya, I had a problem with Cold Heart Canyon where he took names that were too obviously borrowed from other people. Oh. There was a character in there named Kiefer Smotherman, and it's like, man, that sounds an awful lot like Kiefer Sutherland.
Well, you know what?
It really bothered me and took me out of the story.
Well, you know what? He was trying to poke some fun at Hollywood with the whole thing, like guys getting like implants and facial liftings, and so right. I think it might have been. Yeah, it might have been. Wow, I never realized that. So maybe he was making fun of some of Hollywood's people with those names.
Yeah. Well, and Kiefer Smotherman was like a producer.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know. It just, it's like, oh, come on, couldn't you come up with something a little, a little more remote than that, so that we, for me, it just completely pulled me out of the story and made me, stop paying attention to what I was reading for a while, and I had to back up, and I don't know. And that story, that book was so angry.
Cold Heart Canyon?
Yeah. The tone of it was just so, so not like his other books, for me anyway.
There were parts that felt a little uneven for me. Some parts felt a little tacked on from real-life experiences, especially the whole chapter where the dog dies.
Yes, yeah.
And then, of course, we realized in interviews and everything that Clive mentioned that was actually, his own experience with a dog who had died, and him taking him to the vet and all that stuff. And I was like, what does this have to do with Cold Heart Canyon's story? I mean, that was like a whole chapter of the book. And,
and his father had just died when he was writing that.
Yeah.
And I think that the whole angry tone of the book probably comes from, how he was feeling at the time.
Yeah, he was trying to work through feelings, I'm sure, while he was writing that.
Yeah.
And while we're in the topic of sourcing names from Clive Barker's books, once I asked Clive on Twitter if Mamulian from the Damnation game had been a homage to a guy, a stage director from Broadway from the 20s who was called Mamulian as well. And he said, well spotted. Yep, that was his reply to me. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, yeah. If you look it up, it was some Broadway stage director or something from the 20s. He was called Mamulian. I think he was French. So
yeah, it's kind of neat that if you actually ask Clive something intelligent on Twitter, and if you do it at the right time of the day, when it doesn't get buried by 800 million other things, then he'll answer you. Because he stays up late at night, so if it's like 11 o'clock at night or 12 o'clock at night, midnight and you ask an intelligent question, he'll probably answer it. But a lot of people are like, "Oh, you're my influence. Where do you get your ideas?" He gets like 800 million people asking him that.
Yeah, that's probably the worst thing you can ask to a writer.
Yeah.
But Clive Barker and Occupy Midian are probably the only two reasons why I joined Twitter and used it in the first place. So, yeah.
Yeah. So he wrote, anyway, if either of you guys have seen those films, they may be worth mentioning. I really don't see any other homages present in his film work except for Kirsty's Argento-style dream sequence in Hellraiser. Yeah. Okay. I mean, I'm not sure what Argento movie he's thinking of, but he's probably seen a lot more than I have.
Suspiria, maybe?
Could be. So I'm going to watch some of those Bava movies now.
I wish I had more time. It's funny, Roger, but it's like when you have a kid, all of the time, just, it's like you get 2 hours maybe a day, unless you want to sacrifice sleep.
That happens quite a lot.
Yeah. So those were questions from the forum, which is www.timewinds.com/Clive. So that's the forum where we go and talk about Clive Barker stuff all the time. On Facebook, we have a couple of questions. One is from Rick Rudd. He said, I just want to know more about his 18-year-old girlfriend he had when he was 15.
Huh?
He's talking about Clive Barker when he had a girlfriend.
Oh.
He's mentioned that, but, he's really only mentioned that in passing. I don't know what else there is to say about it.
Let me refer this guy to Clive Barker's The Advocate interview. Maybe he'll find what he's looking for there. I don't know. That's the first I've heard, actually, although I'm not surprised at all.
Oh, yeah. I mean, people have asked him before when he came out as being gay, how can you write heterosexual sex or heterosexual relationships? And he said, hey, I've had a girlfriend before, and he's talked a little bit about that. And you can read some of that in Phil and Sarah's book. You can read some of that in Phil and Sarah's first book.
What, Memory, Prophecy, and Fantasy?
Yes, the life, man.
The Works and Worlds of Clive Barker?
Thank you. Yeah, yes, thank you. That book. There's a little bit of that in there, too.
Also, Doug Winter's biography.
The Dark Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then next, Marcus Buckland said, this is a big, long one. I think tracking Damore's journey through Barker's fiction would be very interesting. From Books of Blood to The Great and Secret Show, from Lost Souls to Everville. I also would like to hear your perspective on the differences between The Last Illusion and Lord of Illusions, and if the fleshed-out story film captures the same horrific mood set by the unknown and maybe he means known denizens of hell in the novella, in my opinion, of course. I would also love to hear your opinion on the use of Damore's presence, albeit in word only, in the new Boom Hellraiser comic, his obvious knowledge of the Cenobites and his relationship with Kirsty Cotton, and of course I would very much enjoy any speculation about the Scarlet Gospels and the possible shape of the interconnected Barkerverse once it is all said and done. Thanks. Okay, so that was huge, but I guess we can start out by saying that I was talking with Mark Miller, who's writing the Hellraiser Boom comics, and I asked him about this connection with Harry Damore being in there. I said, does that mean that these comics are a sequel to...
Or a tie-in.
Yeah, a sequel or a tie-in to the Scarlet Gospels. And his answer kind of blew my mind, and I told him that. He said, Clive Barker likes to make sure that every medium has its own continuity. So that means the Scarlet Gospels is related to Lost Souls, Great and Secret Show, Everville, The Last Illusion, and The Hellbound Heart.
Okay.
The comic book Harry Damore is maybe parallel, and it may 1 and 2, but it exists in its own Hellraiser continuity.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I said, wow, that really blew my mind, and when you think about that, it makes a lot of sense in the way things are done. Yep. So this Nightbreed TV series may even refer to things that didn't happen in the movie or the book.
But okay, but what I want to know is, does this Boom comic Hellraiser continuity have anything to do with the previous Epic Marvel Hellraiser comics continuity?
That's a good point.
Is it the same thing, or is it a brand new thing? Because, the other Epic Marvel comics with Jihad and all that stuff, with Nightbreed, so that would mean it would be an extended comic book universe. And all right, I don't know.
That could, but he didn't. He didn't have a lot of control over all of that. So
true.
That's a good point.
Good point. As for the first part of that question, I think that this episode by itself covers most of it. The differences between the movie and the novella, the story. I think that first part of the question is pretty much answered by listening to the podcast.
Yeah.
What was the other part?
Yeah. So I think that there's some teasing hints about what's going on in the Scarlet Gospels in the Boom comic, but I'm only guessing, and they like to keep that kind of a secret. So, we'll just keep buying those comics and find out. Scarlet Gospels is going to come out eventually. When I had asked Mark about when that was going to come out, he was only going to be writing 16 issues of the Hellraiser comic, and he had finished 14 already. But now contract's been extended, and he's writing a lot more of the comics.
Or if people have an idea to ask any questions about that, they can also tweet Mark Miller at Mark Allen Miller.
Yeah.
Twitter, right? You can ask the guy directly.
He's really busy with that, but with the Hellraiser comic, but yeah, I mean, I think it's all really interesting, and I always have sort of had a lot of philosophical, I mean, difficulties with the, trying to tie like the Great and Secret Show to a story like The Last Illusion, because Clive had sort of switched from this version of this Christian hell to a whole different kind of mythology of the Dream Sea and the
and those creatures that show up in Everville through like an interdimensional doorway.
Yeah, the Metacosm, I think, is that right?
Yeah, is it?
The creatures, the Iad Ouroboros that are like mountains and fleas.
Yeah, those are like the shadow creatures that want to engulf everything. But then, isn't there like a part in the Everville? Because I've read Everville a long time ago. But Everville, isn't there a part where like Harry D'Amour gets hints? Not really hints. I mean, he actually gets direct knowledge that maybe the demon that he faced on Wyckoff Street was one of the creatures that came from the same dimension. That the creatures were crossing over into Everville before.
Yeah. Exactly, and that's kind of interesting. But does that mean that everything about like making deals with hell and the gulfs and all of that is all just kind of a lie, or it's not really hell isn't really what everyone thinks it is?
If you're trying to go for an in-house in the extended mythology explanation, yeah. If you go for the practical one, it's because he wrote those things before he came up with the obviously. I mean, and it's not easy to try to tie all of that stuff together. But when you use the same character in all of these things, now the Hellraiser mythology, the Hellbound Heart mythology is going to also be tied into that with the Scarlet Gospels. Yep. So somehow there's also this hell dimension where people get dragged away and tortured forever because they're curious about opening a box. Yeah, but I understand why Mark Miller would say that there's a different continuity for every medium, because the book is going to be like Pinhead dying with Harry D'Amour, and in the comic book, Pinhead has already died, and it was Christie that took over, and it had nothing to do with Harry D'Amour. So, in that right there, you can see that it's going to be a different continuity between the Scarlet Gospels and the comic book.
Right.
So just pointing that out.
Yeah. Of course, he said that he was going to kill off Pinhead in the very beginning when he started writing, and the book has taken a lot of unexpected. It was going to be just a short story that at first, and then it became this gigantic novel, and all these things have happened that he didn't expect, and we have no idea what really is going to happen in the Scarlet Gospels anymore.
I just want to see that story published.
Yes.
I know.
I think I'm going to start stalking Mark Miller.
And Russell had said that he's also helped with the Scarlet Gospels.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, he told me that when I was interviewing the two of them at the convention. I know it was hard to hear because Richard Mall, the guy from Night Court, was screaming the whole time.
Yeah, with his doll.
Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's weird. I never wanted to, I never in my life thought I would want to tell a celebrity to be quiet so that I could,
Yeah. I saw him on videos of the Mad Monster Party, and he was really obnoxiously screaming. So.
Yeah. It was strange. And he was there because of the House movies, I think.
He screamed whenever someone bought a picture or paid for something, right?
Yeah, he did. And he would have the puppet yelling, his Night Court puppet. I think we kind of covered all of that. All right. Well, you can find us on the web at www.clivebarkercast.com. Find us on iTunes. Leave a review. We got one. Actually, now we have 2 reviews. And nice. Roger is going to sing a song.
Really?
So go ahead, Roger. Okay, there you have it. Roger sang you a song.
Oh, my God. He was killed by Decker.
Decker killed me. Oh, no.
Just a little joke. Just a little joke.
Let's not start a groundswell. Thanks, guys. It's been fun.
Man.
Thanks, Roger, for being in the episode.
And you can find us on Facebook, or we have a Facebook page, or you can also find us on the Occupy Midian group. We spend a lot of time there. Twitter is @BarkerCast. We're also on @Occupy Midian. The forum is www.timewins.com/Clive/forum. And go to www.occupymidian.com. That's the official Occupy Midian website. And there's a lot of cool stuff coming in the future on that site. If you want to hear more from Crystal Raen, she's running a blog, www.bringbacknightbreed.blogspot.com, and she's also sort of archiving all of the press about Occupy Midian in one spot on her Scoop It.
Yeah.
Why can I never remember what that's called? Is it Scoop It?
Yes, it is Scoop It.
Scoop.it. Yeah, so her Scoop It, she's collecting everything that she can about Nightbreed and about Occupy Midian in one spot. So that's been a really handy tool for us.
Yeah, I think there's a link for that page at her Bring Back Nightbreed blog. So
yes, so that's it. I think that we're done with this one. You were right to put this off until the next episode.
All you listeners out there, thanks for listening. Leave us a review, and we'll catch you guys in 2 weeks. All right?
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, I'm back again. In the original airing of this episode, we had Magic Moments by Erasure from the Lord of Illusion soundtrack on at the end right here in this spot. And in order to respect the rights holders, again, we've removed it from the episode. I recommend you find the Lord of Illusion soundtrack again and give it a listen. So I know we said that twice. Thanks for understanding. And this podcast, having no beginning, will have no end.